Dan Connolly going to tell you about the RChain bounty program and how to get involved. We probably have enough time and few enough people that I can start by having you guys talk just a little bit. Can somebody tell me what your interest is in the bounty program? One or two people? How to find a bounty. All right. For your skill set. Okay. Now there's probably lots of different skill sets, so just give me one or two words about your skill set. Algorithms. What your interest is. All right, go ahead. How to propose a project.
Economic abstraction tools. Oh. How to propose a project, open source project. We're working on economic abstraction tools.
Economic abstraction tools. All right. This is good. One more? Okay. All righty. So first disclaimer, this is I'm going to describe the project as of March 2018. Just last month, things are changing a little bit. I'll get to more of that at the end. Okay, so the first is an example. There's a guy named Abner Zhang that has said, okay, I'll do those. He kind of got in touch with Meta. That's sometimes the shortest path, not always critical. But anyway, Meta does keep this list. And in particular, let's look at ROS 382. So that's like the real Scala project. So there's this thing about address the compiler warning. So the core dev team doesn't mind too much when there's a bunch of compiler warnings, but if you're a new developer, you look at this and you go, what's going on there? So Abner says, okay, I'll clean those up. He puts his hand up. And then Jira actually also keeps track of pull requests. Anyway, so you can follow a link right there to the pull request. You can see what he did. Like there's this global env variable that wasn't used, and so you replace it with an underscore. Now the Scala compiler is a little more happy, whatever. And then his first attempt at some of these things wasn't quite right. He hadn't read all of the documentation about the coding style guidelines and stuff like that, so they said, that's not quite right. So he went around the loop a couple times. Has anybody done a GitHub pull request? Just one or two. Interesting. Have you? Okay. Really? No, 3 people in the room have done it? Okay, a few more maybe? All right. So you propose some changes. They go not quite right. You polish off the bits and stuff like that. And then it gets merged in. So, okay. So that's the GitHub workflow. I can go into it a little bit, but that's, millions of people do that. And Jira ticket stuff is somewhat straightforward. It's a web app with lists of work to do. The core development team keeps all their stuff in Jira, and then there's specific items that they want help with. Okay, so then how does Abner get paid? All right. Okay, so creating a work item, you go into the RChain bounties repository and you hit new issue. Okay, and it's gonna ask you to make your issue specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So you try to actually do something specific. In practice, sometimes they start out as a little bit fuzzy, but by the time you're actually done, you know a lot more about it. And you suggest a budget. If it's one of these core development things, there's kind of a rate that's been established. So this ticket has 8 story points, which is kind of a measure of difficulty. And there's a rate per story point. I'll get into that just a little bit. So turns out there was an issue by the time Abner came along, but if you have a new one, you fill out the new issue thing. And then there's this voting process that I'll get into just a little bit more. And so he actually did not just that one with the eight points. He did 48 story points worth of stuff in March. And so the budget for that was $6,000. And he did 100% of it, so he got all $6,000. And that's in this rewards.rchain.coop is where the voting goes on. Okay, so that was a specific example. Now zooming out just a little bit. So the RChain bounty program was established in August 2017 with 2 goals. One is to build a thriving open source community. So the case of Abner was kind of case in point there. And the other one was to involve the creative community in telling the story of RChain. So it's not all about writing code necessarily. Okay, so telling the story of RChain. There's things like graphic design that can be done, community outreach, like keeping track of what goes on Telegram, I guess. They're, making sure people don't say crazy things about RChain, that there's an airdrop or something stupid like that. Okay, running meetups. If you run a meetup in your area, you can claim a bounty for that. People have done some translation work. They translated the architecture document into Chinese and Russian and things like that. It's pretty cool. In fact, somebody came up with a video. I'll just see if, drum roll, see if this plays. Of course, the sound I don't have hooked up. So somebody made up a little explainer video about how the bounty program works, which was pretty cool, I thought. So I'm going to tell you all the stuff that he would have read out. In fact, I have my sound turned off. Right. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. All right, so somebody made an explainer video, and that was part of telling the story. All right, that was pretty cool. All right, so if you went to the RChain bounties repository, the README would show up, and there's a few kind of, before you get into the nitty-gritty stuff, there's some sort of norms that are more than the detail rules, the norms. One is be a self-starter. It's not like somebody's going to tell you what to do in all cases. There is that list that Meta keeps where she wants these things done. But if you just have something you want to do, just open an issue and start. Think for yourself. We're trying to do some of this, decentralized work and stuff like that. Let everybody know if things are headed in the wrong direction. Independent thought's a good thing. Get things done. Opinions are cheap. Morals matter. We don't want people scamming. And be nice to each other. A lot of this work gets done online. It's easy to not think of the other person as human and say something that you wouldn't really say in person. Okay, then there's the actual sort of rules. I put too much text on this slide. This is all in the contributing document. But there's kind of two mechanical things to it. One is getting access to the GitHub repository, which involves mail to a guy named HJ, ops at RChain.coop is how you contact him. So getting a collaborator role in the repository, and the other one is getting access to this Google group so that you can do invoice documents and stuff like that, or tax forms in some cases. So there's two things. Most of it happens through GitHub, but there is also this Google group. Somebody wanted to know how to propose a new thing. There it is. Can it work for larger scale projects is the question. So in theory, yes. My advice would be to break your project down into things that fit into a month. So for example, I did a project that took more than a month, and I said, okay, prototype. Or at least the issue started as do the whole thing, but it turns out that I could only get a prototype done in the first month, so I kind of reduced the scope and claimed a bounty for that, and then the next month was put it into production. Okay, so the GitHub repository and the Google group. All right, so then there's two phases to the actual bounty project, bounty process. The budgets are allocated to items by at least 3 members, and the average of the votes of at least 3 defines the budget. So here's a few items where the budget's work is going on, and you can see that the first one has only 1 vote, so it's got a provisional budget, but it doesn't have a real budget. And the second one's got 2 votes. It also doesn't have a real budget yet. But by the time you got 3 votes or more, then the provisional budget actually becomes the real budget. Fair enough. And the same thing happens with, okay, now there's a budget for the work item, then there's how much of the budget goes to each person. And that happens the same way. It's like, Fred gets 20% of the thing if 3 people say so. In the average, or 5 people or whatever, or more, whatever, the average of the votes, on the percentage of the work says how much goes on. I've got a duplicate slide. I'll repeat the question. So are there checks against this to make sure we don't have people gaming this system or whatever? Early on, the short answer is almost no. It's designed to be self-policing. There have been, if you see somebody claiming some ridiculous amount, you're supposed to go over and say something to them. Now, it turns out that this is not a pleasant thing to do. You don't really want to be telling somebody else their business and stuff like that. So there are sort of weekly meetings where we talk about this kind of thing. And there's something I'll get to towards the end where we're tuning the process a little bit. But so it's partly these norms, these sort of social norms, and then actual mechanisms to change things we're looking into. Okay. And then, so after we do all this distributed stuff, the actual writing a check is centralized. There's somebody at the co-op who actually writes a check makes a crypto payment or doesn't make a crypto payment. The budgets are priced in US dollars, but it's paid out in rock. And the amount of rock per dollars is taken as like a 30-day moving average kind of thing. So at the end of the month, the votes close. In fact, they've kind of given an extra week, to 7th of the following month to sort of review the votes and stuff like that. And then you get a pre-filled invoice, and then you basically say, yep, and you send it back. Or you say, no, my address is wrong. You got a question? There's a mic coming. Hang on just a sec.
I guess this is sort of related, but are there any internal markets within the cooperative?
I don't think so, but tell me what you mean by internal market.
Well, so the price is a 30-day average over the public markets, like KuCoin or wherever it's sold. Is that accurate, or is there an internal market for rocks?
So early on, there was a couple of private sales or whatever, and that established a price. But these days, they use coin market cap in the last 30 days and stuff like that. So I'm not aware of any other way to price stuff. So you get a pre-filled invoice, you double check it, you say yep, you send it into invoices, and then the final payment is at the discretion of the operations manager and the co-op officer. So if you did something crazy, they can just say nope. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'll just hint at a couple things that are changing. One, there's this trust metric stuff where anybody heard of Advogado? It was a system from a long time ago. Oh well. It was this open source blogging thing, and the way they kept spam out of the thing was that there was kind of a few people that were at the top, and then they endorsed some people, and then those people endorsed some people, and then those people endorsed some people, and such like that. So you get this network, and while you're endorsing somebody, you can say, oh, that person's really top notch, or they're kind of middle of the road, or they're just starting out. So you can say they're the master, a junior, or an apprentice. And then there's this calculation that runs over all the stuff, and then you end up with a rating for each person. So the software is written, and we just haven't had it affect the policy yet, but that is likely to get it in place any day now. And then the other thing is the board made this decision about terms of service on April 6th, and it's kind of unclear at this point exactly how that's going to work out, but there's at least some legal language that says don't say crazy things about rock. That we're going to put into the footers of everything. So it's kind of short and sweet. Maybe there's more questions.
So those were pretty good examples on the technical side, but half of the bullet points you had on whatever slide 4 or 7 or something, boom. Community outreach, meetups, graphic design, translation, some of those, the story of RChain, is that also kept up by Meta in her backlog of things to be bountied or rewarded? Or is that in another spot?
Nope.
Is it anywhere?
Nope. Be a self-starter. Because there's no boss, nobody's going to tell you what to do. That's what, So if you got a great idea on how to tell the story of RChain, you submit it, and if other people think it's valuable, then you get rewarded. Check 1, 2. We're getting there.
Okay.
There we go.
But there seems to be kind of an accidental circularity there. We're like, so I'm kind of new, happened to be watching it for about 2 months, but really digging in for 2 weeks. I have tons of ideas. I could put it up there, but that still doesn't kind of make sense to me. So that is in the same developer.rchain and down that path, and it includes everything, not just developer work? Or did I miss something about where these are actually located?
Okay, so the bounties are all done through this RChain/bounties repository. I might have drawn things up a little bit confusingly. So the RChain bounties is where all this bounty stuff goes on. And then RChain/RChain is where the core development work goes on. So if you want to contribute to the core development work, you can do a pull request there and claim a bounty. But if you just want to have some great idea about, I forget what your idea over here was, and you want to throw it at the wall and see if it sticks, if you have a great idea for what would be, improve the way people experience RChain or know about it and all that kind of stuff, then you submit a bounty issue. Am I making sense? You're awful furrowed.
Okay, so I'm going to say more concrete. Like if I wanted to start a meetup in Denver, like what would be the process? I'm sorry to seem kind of thick.
No, that's what I'm here for. Okay, so there's a github.com in front of that URL, but you go to this page and you write at the top, meetup in Denver, and then you kind of estimate what you think it's going to cost you, and then if at least a couple other members think that that's a worthwhile thing, then you're off and running. And that's happened, there's many meetups. I don't know, I've seen 6 or 8 go through this process. So. And in fact, there's actually some materials specifically about meetups. Okay, so there's a wiki. If something happens 2 or 3 times, we try to stick it into the wiki. So there's a meetup calendar. Bring 10 to 50 hard copies of the architecture documents. So I hope that makes a certain amount of sense. This 250 rocks looks out of date because things are priced in dollars these days. Make sure you got your receipts. Maybe there's another question.
Yeah. I got the mic.
All right.
So can you go to a place right here that shows us some of those, the 4 bulleted types of requested bounty items? I mean, because it seems pretty straightforward, and I've seen the stuff on the developer side, but not for the, like translate to Ukrainian, like that.
There you go. Managing Telegram growth. Somebody's going to make another video about RNode 0.2.1. There's some work on the member site, organizing speakers and representatives. Somebody thinks an office in Seattle. Oh, I guess there's more to that one. Anyway, I'm starting an effort to there was a bunch of people who translated the architecture document, and yet parts of the architecture document are a little out of date, so maybe we'll take some of that energy and put it into actually revising the architecture document. I'm hoping to do that. So that's... Ask the question again, please.
Where do you see the report on that?
So this one I have not suggested it yet, and I have not done, I haven't done very much of the work, so I usually tend to come up with a budget after I've done a certain amount of the work, but this is where the actual budgets are and stuff. So this, there we go. So 2018-03 is March, so those are all, those have all gone by. The current pay period is April. So that's where those budgets are. Did that answer the question? And that's rewards.rchain.coop. questions? Come on.
Okay, so you just mentioned the fact that that sometimes you don't put the budget in until you've worked on it for a bit.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense for you because you're full time, right?
No.
You're not. Are you not full time?
Not at all.
It's just totally
The
I was
only
just
way
like,
I've ever been paid is through the bounty.
I'm sorry. I just assumed you're on Discord so much that I assumed that you were full time on this project. So I'm sorry. Totally
Very
bad
engaged
assumption.
member.
Yes.
My
Yeah.
title is very engaged member.
Yeah, totally. Completely misjudged that. Okay, well, but my presumption would be that like you understand the system well enough that like you don't need to put the budget in. You know, eventually it'll get approved because you're doing valuable things.
Okay.
Mostly, like
Roughly?
no,
Okay. Well,
roughly.
I mean, not all the stuff.
You're standing up there. I feel like enough people will
I
back
get
you up.
rewarded for about 2/3 of my ideas, I think.
Yeah. So, should we generally though be going through the old bounties to get a rough idea of like, so I'm going to be doing some documentation. Like, what should I think my hourly rate on that be for the effort, and then I ballpark it in advance to make sure that I'm somewhere in the vicinity of a thing that seems reasonable to the rest of the community. I'm talking about for like the first couple of bounties, like literally trying to get in the door. Once you get to number 10, you've kind of know what's going on.
So looking at previous work, certainly better than nothing. There's an issue because sometimes the things were pretty bumpy early on, and so sometimes what people did before was actually what not to do. There is a weekly meeting that RChain company run right before Greg Medhurst. Greg, it used to be after. They rescheduled it to before. Let me find the details on that meeting real quick. So if you just want to talk to people about how it works and stuff, so yeah, they run this meeting so this is RChain's on holiday, so Kit Blake is arranging it, so we can go and look at what they talked about. So they talked about the new terms of service and the member site and maybe some Lumio stuff. But this is sort of the best place to get the information, is to go and chat with people. It's a Zoom. Anybody else got an idea? Questions? We're going to go get more cookies? Oh, okay. All right, we're going to tempt the demo gods once more.
RChain's distributed budget and rewards bounty program consists of an application where funds are allocated to budget for collaborating on GitHub issues. In order to qualify for rewards, membership in the RChain cooperative is required, but to create an issue, all you need is a GitHub account so that you can post and collaborate on work items represented in GitHub RChain bounties. The process works via a communal budget and reward allocation system with peer review and voting. Budgets are allocated to work items by at least 3 members. The average of the votes from 3 or more members defines the budget for the issue. During the month, each member may vote on what portion of the budget is distributed to each collaborator as a reward for their participation. The average of at least 3 votes sets the personal reward for each collaborator. Rocks are distributed monthly based on invoices submitted. By joining the cooperative, you'll be able to participate in the lively conversation of the RChain community, vote on budgets and rewards, and earn rocks for bounties.
I thought that was pretty cool. All right, is that a wrap? All right, thanks everybody.